This computer. All right, we're live. So it is really my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Tom Kelley. I met Tom years ago at an annual conference for the three principles. I don't even remember which one, maybe the one in San Jose. And I've always had Tom on a pedestal because he's been a researcher for the principles. And I just found out, we had a little chat before going live, that he actually has 25 published research articles, peer-reviewed articles that have been published about the three principles. And as you know, the purpose of this dating site is to share these principles, how much of an impact they have had on our life, knowing about them. So this conversation that I had with Tom many years back now, was really the first interview that I wound up doing for I call it the love book, The Secret of Love, that I wrote with Chris Heath, because I was so touched listening to Tom's story about his dating escapades and the fact that he is now married for 15 years. So I think we had that conversation, Tom, at the beginning stages of your marriage. That's how long ago that was. And I can't wait to have this on recorded, your story. It was such a wonderful story. I think you remember it was hard for me to hold back tears listening to it. But the other thing I want to say about Tom is that he's also a professor at Wayne State University in Michigan. He's a professor of criminology and psychology. And he's written a book called How Good Can You Stand It? I'll have all of these links posted in our resource section of this course. So, and Tom also has his own private counseling center in Michigan called Reflections Counseling Center. So thank you so much, Tom. Such a busy schedule you have, and you're giving up time for this program. So thank you. You're on.
Well, I mean, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I remember back in Jose, I think Lori was looking for people who had done the best possible job in screwing up their past relationships. And it was like a magnetic force drawn to me. And so we had a wonderful conversation, and apparently Lori picked up something that she thought would be helpful to people. Yeah, relationships. It's interesting, looking back at the before and then the after, and I mean the thing that shifted it, obviously, like for so many others, was finally understanding how we all work psychologically. It's so innocent to screw up relationships when you don't understand that. People are just simply living life the way we all do, using the principles, and not understanding, for the most part, that that's what's going on. So, I mean, they're living in these realities that look real, and they're moving into relationships in these realities that look real to them. And, it's interesting, people have said to me, you're pretty open about the relationships you screwed up in the past. And people see that as, I don't know, as something good, something positive, and I agree. But the reason that I'm open about it is because I understand my own innocence. I mean, I used to be embarrassed telling people that I was divorced twice and this is my third marriage. The interesting thing is, it's clear to me that if I hadn't been exposed to the principles and had the understanding that I have now, very honestly, I might have been married 4 or 5 different times, because basically I was in a vicious circle, in a pattern that just kept repeating itself over and over again. And that's the best that I could do. And that's true for all of us. And like so many people, you know, I searched for ways to have better relationships and learn skills. My God, I'm a psychologist, right? I mean, I'm supposed to have these skills, right? And talked with other people about relationships. And I mean, it wasn't that I was totally stupid. I mean, I was doing certain things right. And so I had certain things to share with other people that I assume were helpful. And I had a certain understanding of thought. Anyway, let me take this and talk about how it was for me when I was directed by the thinking that I had then. You know, basic, and it was funny, I was thinking before our session, and all of a sudden a thought came to me that I didn't share with you in this story, and it goes way back to when I was younger. And I can remember having a crush on a girl, I think maybe in grade school or junior high school. And she didn't particularly like me. And she picked another guy who I thought was much more attractive than me. And I think I made up a story in my mind that there was something wrong with me because she didn't pick me. And what was wrong with me to some extent was that I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't attractive enough. And so it's interesting because I think on some level I made up my mind that in order for me to prove in some way that I was attractive enough, you know, or good enough, that I had to make sure that I could get pretty women to be with me. And I think it went way back to that. The other thing was, you know, I grew up with just a wonderful mother who was very pretty. And she was a model. She modeled in certain modeling things. And when my father and my mother would go out to dinner, they would come back. And my father would say, "Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many compliments your mother got while we were out." And she would smile and blush. And of course, all the compliments were related to her physical appearance.
Wow.
That was pretty much it. Now, she took a lot of pride in that. And I think along the way, you know, I kind of thought that people's worth depended on how they looked. And I always kind of thought, well, I don't measure up. I'm not as attractive or pretty as I'd like to be. It was interesting. It focused mainly on how I thought my face looked. Didn't bother me that I'm only 5'8". Didn't bother me that I'm not that big of a guy. But that bothered me. You know, and it's interesting how people's thinking focus and create certain illusions that, of course, they think are true. So my consciousness was kind of constantly contaminated with these thoughts about how do you look. If a patient of mine would come in and I'd be seeing them, and they would, this is back away, not so much now, although it still gets me now every now and then. And they would say, "Oh, Dr. Kelley, you look tired." My thinking would start going. And to me, that would mean you look bad. And so it was hard for me to keep my mind on the session because my thinking wanted me to get up and go to the bathroom and look in the mirror to see how bad do I look. and then maybe try to do something, to make myself feel better. Well, when we innocently have this pure presence, this pure consciousness, begin to be contaminated with all this personal thinking that we innocently pick up along the way, and we don't understand really what it is, it just creates an experience that's discordant, it's uncomfortable. And of course, who likes to feel uncomfortable? And so we do our best to try to find a way to feel more comfortable. Well, in terms of relationships, this thinking that I've kind of tried to describe, that became my guide, rather than my wisdom, rather than my common sense, rather than my knowing, had me look for women to be in relationships with. So when I walked into a room, my ego would immediately pick out certain women who looked a particular way. And of course, meeting them and getting them to be with me was a very important part of what I thought was my self-worth, my self-esteem. If I could get one of those that I thought was a very attractive woman to be with me, to go out on a date, to like me, etc., then I had a high. It was an ego high. It wasn't love. It was an ego high. And gosh, I can remember seeing one woman when I worked at an old clinic I was at on an elevator, and man, she fit my pictures. Ooh, and I started to get excited, and then I looked down and her finger had a ring. And of course, yeah. And so I left, and 2 years later, I was talking to another therapist, and her name happened to come up, and the therapist said, "Oh, she's divorced." "Oh, well, can you fix this up?" So she fixed me up with this woman, and we met for dinner. And of course, she looked great to me. I mean, but I can remember that dinner, and I realized there's something wrong with this woman. It's just, I mean, I really, my wisdom, I guess, came up enough to say there's something wrong. But I'll tell you, I was, she fit the pictures. So we went out a few times, and yeah, I had that high. But like most of the women I was meeting, there was something wrong. It wasn't right. I knew it on some level. And a lot of the women were fine. I mean, they needed to learn the principles because they picked me. Their wisdom should have said, don't pick him. But I was pretty good at my spiel and my story, and whatever. And of course, I was doing well and had a lot of things that women pick men for, their career and they got a PhD, and all that stuff. And I think it's one reason women pick men for the wrong reason, just like men pick women for the wrong reason. So anyway, I went out with this lady, and she invited me over for dinner one night, and she said, well, she called me and said, I'm going to be late, so I'm not going to be there till 9. So come on over, the door will be open. When I got there, the door was open. And I just figured that because it was 9, that we weren't going to eat. And I had taken over some carpet samples and some tile samples to get her opinion because I was working on my house. Okay. And so I put them down on the floor, and I saw her in the kitchen making some food, and I said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that we were going to eat. I already had something." And then I could see her change in expression. I said, "But I'm still hungry." And she took the salad and threw it in the sink and picked up my tile samples and shoved him into my chest and said, "You get out of here. You don't assume anything with me." And I was like dazed. And I went out into my car, and I'm sitting in my car, dazed, saying to myself, "You love her and she's crazy. You love her and she's crazy." And I didn't understand it. But I left because she was very intense about, "You get out of here." Well, later on, I called her, and it was interesting. And she said, "Well, you can come over, but you got to be good." And and of course, because I was dependent on a relationship to feel okay, even though I knew she was crazy, I still had this feeling of loss. And so I went back over and tried to be good.
On your terms or her terms?
Well, I really didn't know what her terms were. So I was like walking on eggshells. And of course, while this was going on, I'm still out there looking for a replacement, because on some level I realized this is kind of dangerous to be in this relationship. But because when you're dependent on something, and of course the dependency is an illusion, but it still feels that way. So I stayed, and it lasted for maybe 3 or 4 more weeks, and she finally dumped me, which was good. And she told me, "You're the most insecure man I've ever met, and you just this and that." And so at that point, I realized this is not safe to stay with this lady. So I left. There were a lot of women who I picked who were wonderful people. I mean, I think about them now, and my time with them was really wonderful. I mean, it was really the best that it could be at the time. But they weren't my soulmates, because I didn't pick them from my wisdom. I didn't know how to pick them from my wisdom. And after I picked, it was interesting. I knew it wasn't right. On some level, I knew it wasn't right. And so I was always looking for another one, with my ego picking, thinking that sooner or later it would be right. It's never right when your ego's picking. But when you don't know that, you keep on doing what you do. Well, after my second divorce, I got into therapy and started looking at this stuff, and got into cognitive behavior therapy and learned a few things. But I'll tell you, when you're trying to learn from the outside in, it just doesn't do the trick. It just doesn't. And so you keep searching. And so I discovered the principles very fortuitously. Just found a book. I think one of the first books that was written on the principles, Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense. And I had done the old S training, Werner Erhardt's S training, and reading the book really resonated with me. And I thought, God, I bet these people have done the S training. And so I called one of the authors, I think Rick Suarez, and said, "Loved your book. Have you guys done the S training?" And he said, "We've been asked that before, but no, we haven't." And so it just so happened that one of the conferences was down in St. Pete Beach, Florida, where my mother used to live. And I went down, and I saw that they were applying the principles to a lot of things that related to criminology and criminal justice. In some of the worst housing projects with some of the worst crime rates in the country, with Roger Mills, wonderful Roger, who was a prolific writer. and who'd written a lot of things on the way the principles were viewed back then. And that was very intriguing to me, being a professor. And so that's when my journey with the principles began. And of course, as you well know, that evolved considerably over a period of time. I mean, I remember when there were 4 principles. And then Sydney Banks got pissed at people and called them in and said, hold on here, there are 3. And then,
a lot of confusion back then.
There was a lot of confusion back then, yes. Well, understanding the principles helped me break my addiction to women. And so I realized that what mattered was finding someone where there wasn't that high, but a nice feeling.
Nice feeling. Good feeling.
Yeah. And so I was on Match.com back then, and I probably met, oh my God, maybe 50, 60 different women. You know, you go out for coffee and you meet. And since I wasn't dependent on having a woman in my life, I went for about 5 or 6 years really without any long-term relationship, and was very happy. Got to a point where I was okay whether I had a relationship or not. I mean, I think that's important too. When a relationship becomes essential, when it becomes mandatory, rather than the frosting on the cake, where it becomes the whole cake, you're going to have trouble. And so I was looking for the frosting. I must be honest, you know, if it came along with a pretty package, that would have been fine. Okay. But when the feeling wasn't there, and sometimes the people that I would meet were attractive, and there would be maybe a sexual attraction and a thought, well, you could go out and maybe you could score or something or have some good sex. But pretty much I let that go. And just simply went on with my life. But I think when people are happy, there's kind of a natural inclination to want to be in relationship. And that's not just with other people, even though very interestingly, I find myself being much more of a loner with other people. I find myself being very, very satisfied being with me, you know, and being quiet.
Right.
I
think the ultimate is both being content and happy alone or with others. Right?
Yes. So I kept on looking. And then finally, you know, I met this woman whom I'm married to now, who happens to be Asian. She's Chinese, at a mall. And we went over to a restaurant and ordered a meal. And she was very quiet. And I found her attractive. But again, well, anyway, I said to her, you know, you seem pretty quiet, and I'm just wondering, maybe you don't like me that much, and if not, I understand that. And she said, maybe I'm just nervous. And that was really a nice thing. I mean, that was very nice thing to say, as I recall it. Yeah.
Genuine.
And so I relaxed when she said that, and there was a connection. We ended up walking around the mall, and there was just a connection there, and also a strong attraction as well. And so we went out a few times, and I took her to a party with some of my good friends who knew the women that I picked from my ego. And my wife now, her Chinese name is Xinxin, which interesting, X-I-N, X-I-N. I didn't realize that means 2 hearts. She said, you know, I have 2 hearts. I said, well, how do you mean? Well, that's my name. Xinxin means heart, heart, I guess, in Chinese. And we went to the party, and I had a great time. And the next day, I got a phone message on my answering machine from one of my friends at the party. And the message was, "Where did you meet her? Was she cleaning hotel rooms? And did you see her teeth?" And it was interesting because this is a good friend of mine. And I guess this friend didn't think this woman fit the pictures of the women that I usually brought around. And perhaps was startled by that, or maybe even her ego was pricked to some extent because Tom wasn't bringing in his usual trophies, or whatever you want to call it. First feeling I had was anger. And of course, I realized it wasn't in my best interest to hold on to that. But I realize now that the anger came because I had a connection with my wife, and it bothered me because I really had a connection with her. And I thought it was inappropriate that this person would say that. Probably was. And so I called the person back and without being angry, and I said, "Jan, I really have a connection with this lady, and I plan to continue seeing her, and I wish you'd take another look." And she apologized, and so we went on. But the next time I saw my wife, I started to check out her teeth.
Which you hadn't even noticed before.
Which I hadn't even noticed before. And now I noticed them. And my old ego thinking came in and started to create anxiety because her teeth weren't perfect. And they were kind of a little bucky once I began looking at them, although I didn't notice them. And then I also began to notice other things about her that didn't fit the old pictures, and began having anxiety. Now, had I not learned the principles, I'm absolutely sure I would have dumped her. In the past, if that friend had called me and said that, and after that I would have noticed these things, that would have been it. And when I told you this before, and even now, that creates, the thoughts of that create sadness right now. That I would have dumped a person who was my soulmate because of that. Well, what comes to mind is how many people are in jail because they've done something stupid because of that. Nobody can arrest me for doing that. But what a difference that makes in your life. Well, so I must be honest. I found out about my wife's teeth. She didn't have all that much dental care in China. She came here at age 30. So I must admit, we did go around to different dentists to see what we could do. Okay. But this anxiety would come up for me sporadically. I didn't know when my wife would come in when our dating times to see me, and she would walk in. Sometimes it would be there and sometimes it wouldn't. Most of the time in the beginning, however, after the teeth thing, it would. And I would just simply do my best to be gracious and do whatever we did, the old fake it till you make it thing. And didn't tell her or whatever, and waited for the anxiety to go. And sometimes it would last the whole date. And then it would go. And when it went, when the snow globe settled, I knew I loved her. I knew it was right. And I trusted that. And she said to me once, and I love this, it was like maybe I'm a little nervous. She said to me once, "One day you're going to learn to love my teeth." And at that moment I thought, well, I'm not sure about that. I know I love you. I didn't say that. I said it to myself. But it was interesting. I remember another time when we were dating, and she took me over to Canada because her parents, she was a Canadian citizen before, because took me over to Canada to meet her parents. And she had rented a little room for them over there. We went over, walked in, and there was this kind of tall, skinny guy, Chinese guy, and then this kind of roly-poly little woman. And I went and I hugged them, and they didn't speak English, and they, invited me in. Oh, you sit over here. And I was in the best chair in the room, but it had stuffing coming out of the arm. And then there was another young woman that walked through. And of course, I'm looking at her, and she wasn't particularly attractive. And that was my wife's sister. And the reason we were there, we were going to drive them up to Toronto to get a visa so they could come back into the US. And at that point, my anxiety went wild. Like, these are my in-laws. This is my sister-in-law. And they don't fit the ego. And I'm in the car driving these people. The two parents are in the back seat. My wife-to-be is in shotgun. And I'm driving up to Toronto, which is, I think, about a 4.5-hour drive from Michigan. And I'm like frozen in anxiety and really kind of on the cusp, wondering. I mean, it's really got me. It reminds me, Jack Pransky in his new book writes to some extent about his relationships and how he was grabbed by this too. I don't know. Jack has his history as well. Yes. Anyway, my wife has food, and she's feeding me grapes as we're going up there. And about 2.5 hours into the drive, my mind cleared. And I realized in that moment how sweet these two people were in the back seat, these two Chinese people, and how wonderful my wife was. Thank God. And the rest of the trip was fine. It took about 9 months. I equate my anxiety leaving with my wife and her teeth and whatever else to what it was like when I quit smoking. I quit smoking at 26, and it took about a year for my thoughts to smoke to settle down and go away. Every time I'd get them, I would avoid it. But to change my brain, the computer brain, to stop giving me those urges took about a year. That's what it took with my wife. And the anxiety just totally went, and I love her teeth.
When you said that, she said, someday you'll learn to love my teeth. I thought, well, that's wisdom coming through her.
Exactly. And she, the beauty of her is that she's so present. I mean, she's got her stuff that grabs her. But I was watching a video yesterday of Dicken. Dicken Bettinger did a video called something about search for wisdom, and talking about relationships and how it is when our state of mind fluctuates and it goes up and down. And he was talking about his relationship with Cozy, and talking about when they both go down, Cozy has a tendency to be critical, and Dicken has a tendency to worry. And so before, his mind would go down, or they'd both be in a low state of mind, and he'd be thinking, oh, why is Cozy like that? Why does she get so critical? And he'd start to worry about it. And he said that would be their conversation. When they would talk about issues, it would be about him worrying and her being critical when they were in a low mood. And of course, he would say to her, Cozy, why do you have to be so critical? And she would say, well, who's being critical And that would go on. Well, look, I mean, that happens in relationships, my God. And Dickens said, you know when I'm in a great state of mind, that's when we talk about issues. That's when we do things. That's when I parent. When I'm not in a good state, I keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that understanding right there.
Yeah.
People could just simply get that.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yes. Big time.
Yeah.
I interviewed them for The Secret of Love, and they gave the story about he wanted to move out to Washington. They were living in Vermont. He wanted to move out to Washington to work with the Pranskys.
Yes.
And it was their son's senior year in high school. They could not figure out what to do, but they had an ironclad rule that when they got together to discuss it, if anybody got upset, they would table it and pick it up again the next day. And one day it just clicked, like they all said, yes, that's the answer. He'll go out for the year. We'll stay in Vermont for the year until Ben finishes school. And we will make it, and I want to cry just telling you about it. We're going to make it the best year ever. They were out just making it a great year. They had a wonderful time visiting each other. You know, I don't know if there was online chatting like this back then, but anything is possible. It's a matter of utilizing our understanding that we will access wisdom when we're in that peaceful, quiet state of mind, not when we're upset and agitated in our ego mind, like you say.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, is that I mean, it's much less now for me, but there's still times where my wife and I will get gripped,
Sure,
less healthy thinking, and act like idiots. But when you understand what it is that you've gotten gripped by unhealthy thinking and you acted like an idiot, when you simply get that, it just makes sense not to take it seriously.
right.
I remember I had a client who lost a job and was up at 2 a.m. Drinking scotch, and had this thought at 2 a.m, I don't love my wife anymore. I think we should get divorced. Went in and woke his wife up. Well, what's the matter, dear? What's going on? We need to talk. Well, what? What is it? I don't think I love you anymore. I think we should end the relationship. Well, of course, now she's blindsided, and they're up all night discussing it. And of course, they finally go to bed at 6 a.m. or whatever. And so for the next 2 weeks, there's this awful feeling in the house, and they're really not talking about it all that much, but they're pointed in the direction of it's going to end and we're going to get a divorce. And so about 3 weeks later, this guy gets another job and his mood goes up. And guess what? He loves his wife. The loving feelings come back. And so he goes and tells her, honey, I don't think I want a divorce. Well, now she doesn't know what to think. Doesn't know if she can trust him. How can he want a divorce 3 weeks ago and now this? And then that's where they came in to see me. Because, she just didn't trust him anymore. And you can understand that. She didn't understand it. And so finally, she began to understand what we're talking about, saw it in a different way. Okay, we all get gripped in that. I don't want to believe how he saw it then. I want to believe how we see it when we're in a good state of mind and trust that. But that's what people do. And my gosh, you can see how people innocently screw things up.
You have to know when to, what's that saying? When to hold them and when to fold them. You have to know
when to zip it.
Now is not the time. Zip it. I learned a good one from a 13-year-old client of mine. He says, zip it, lock it, and put it in your pocket.
There you go.
Zip it, lock it, and put it in your pocket. That is not a time to discuss major things because when you're in that serious mode, it's going to look serious.
Yeah, it always does. But then apologizing is easier too. You know, my wife is interesting. She doesn't know the principles, but she really lives them. Um, and one of the wonderful things about her is that she gets over things easily. Sometimes it takes me giving her $100, which is my replacement for flowers and candy. Uh, but that works with her. I don't know if that's a
You're
change.
telling me this story that Asians like money. That's their, yeah, or she does anyway. She likes money. So after you get caught up, you'll say to her, if I remember the story correctly, correct me, Tom, that you would say to her, "Oh, have I been a stupid man?"
Well, I've done that. I've learned to do that. I've learned to do that. But she would say after I would get nuts like that, she would say, "You need a penalty." And most of the time, when she says that, I realize, yeah. And so, it's like for me, the penalty is, yeah, I write a check or give her some money, which saves me a lot of time. I don't have to go to the florist. I don't have to, go buy candy or whatever. I just open my wallet. Or maybe sometimes I have to go to the bank. But, and then it's done. It's done. And so sometimes now, if I get nuts, she doesn't even have to say, "You need a penalty." I say, "I need a penalty." So here. And it's done and it's gone. And so here's the interesting, and I've said this before, the only thing I can equate a relationship that people have that's had from the principles or an understanding of the principles is the relationship that most people have with their pets. Because for some reason with pets, the ego doesn't particularly have much of a say. We're not that judgmental with pets. I don't know that I've ever really looked at the dogs and cats' teeth other than to make sure that I've taken them to the dentist or whatever. I don't wake up one morning and go, your fur is getting a little gray. Maybe you go out and find some hair dye. Never had that thought. And each morning I get up, just like the pet. You have your pet wagging their tail, anxious to see you every morning. And they eat the same damn food every morning, too. The same thing, though they're just ready to eat it, And I don't recall one morning where I wasn't happy to see pets that I've had in the past. Well, it's the same way with my wife. And that's because we haven't screwed up the lens with a lot of thought that we've taken seriously.
Right.
And I'm a lucky man that I've learned this.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I probably would be still doing what I did in relationships. And have a hell of a lot of alimony to pay. Yeah. Fortunately, my early divorces, neither one of us had anything. So we just split the cars. I got lucky.
You got lucky.
And also we didn't have children. You can imagine making all that. And then you've got children and you've got, all this stuff that you've got to manage. It's not that people can't have these understandings and still have a wonderful life, even if they have children and ex-wives and all of that. I know people who understand the principles whose ex-wives are working for them.
Right.
And their relationship is fine.
Right. And the same is true for single people, the men I've had relationships with, some of them still remain friends of mine. I just haven't found that soulmate yet, that soulmate feeling.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And the key is, it was funny, before I met my wife, I realized I could go on for the rest of my life. And if I didn't find someone like that, I'd be fine.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful. I mean, my thinking is you're going to find your soulmate eventually. And if you don't, you'll be fine.
The world is our soulmate.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I have an interesting recent story. I was in a relationship, 9 weeks doesn't sound like much. It's just 1 week more than 2 months, but it felt really special in that the feeling was so nice. He had a really nice state of mind, calm, and I was the one who got dumped. I
Hmm.
was dumped, but I was so proud of myself that um, he didn't have a car. He drove his work truck, which was old and beat up and rusted. So if we went somewhere, we went in my car. And I'm thinking, wow, Lori, you've really progressed. You'd never look at somebody like that twice, and here you are feeling really good being with him. I'm so happy to have arrived at that place in my life. And then I'm the one who got dumped because he met somebody or he ran into somebody he'd had eyes for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he had watched, he had a part-time job that he saw her come in at a ski place, and she was a skier. And he was looking at her for 4 years. And then finally, he got up the courage to ask her for coffee, and they really hit it off. And I'm thinking, wow, that's wonderful. I'm so happy. Maybe somehow I gave him the courage to finally ask her for coffee after 4 years, but that's my ego kicking in, thinking that I had something to do with it. But it was really wonderful to say that, I was willing to take it as, see what happened with us. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I wasn't the one to end it, but yet when it ended, that's fine. That was the shelf life of that relationship. That was the period of time.
Yeah, I mean, everything is perfect. The way it is and the way it isn't. I mean, even ego is perfect. I mean, our behavior is just going to align with it. And if hopefully this guy dumped you because it was wise for him to do it. If it wasn't, then hopefully that's something he'll see down the road. I mean, it's interesting when people, without understanding the principles, there are sometimes that people can be together or meet and their minds clear and they realize in that moment that they are soulmates. But when people don't understand that distinction, it just seems to me that just like with me and other thoughts can come in that can scare people. I mean, not that can scare them, but people can get scary thoughts about having a nice feeling towards someone.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think this guy was stupid. He should have said. But on the other hand, if it was wise for him to go, then it's better for you he went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's all fine. I just see it as it all has a season that nature somehow takes care of us.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife, for example, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I came up with a new diagnosis, Tom.
Yeah.
I called it, because somebody who heard the story said, actually, I was telling this story to Chris Heath. We were doing some editing. And she said, oh my God, how stupid. He's so what a stupid man. And I said, well, thank you very much, Chris. Of course, you're like a sister to me. You would think that. And I said, but you know what? It's not that he was stupid. I called it, what did I call it now? Biological innocence. Biological innocence. If a man is like a hunter by nature, right? And so he's been eyeing this woman for 4 years. She's a trophy for him. She could be addicted to drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, who knows what, all kinds of crazy, like the woman who stabbed you with your tiles. But if he was looking at her for 4 years, that is still a trophy to
Mm.
him. See, that's the human ego that gets in the way for all of us.
Yes.
With a man for 3.5 years. The day we moved in together was the day my father passed away.
Mm.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
The next day, Tom, I like sat up in bed and it was like, wow, I'm with the man my father wanted me to be with.
Mm.
The MD, the high profiles, physician, head of the lab at the big hospital. I'm with the man my father wanted to be with. But we don't see it until we see it. And he has since gotten married to the perfect person for him. So
Okay. Yeah.
it's all works out. It all works out somehow.
Yeah. No, I remember one of the things my wife and her ego revolves around money, and it revolves around collecting money. I think that's her security blanket. It's still there, and I kid her about it, but it doesn't get in the way that much. But I remember one time when we were dating, uh, I said to her, because I knew she had done well, and she had a reasonable amount of money because she saved every penny. And I said, "Oh, well, good. You know, I think if we stay together, I think I'm going to retire, and then you can take care of me." And I was just joking, and I didn't realize it, but she really got scared by that statement. And she didn't call me for about 4 or 5 days, and she really seriously thought about dumping me because she took that serious. She didn't hear, maybe, a little communication between cultures too. She didn't see it as a joke, but apparently that didn't do it, fortunately. But yeah, that can happen.
Well, how did you come to realize that that's why she wasn't calling you for 4 days?
I don't know that there was the point where we got back together on that. I don't think that she told me directly, so I really didn't know. So when she got back to me, I'm not sure exactly what we talked about then, but it's just clear to me now that had to be it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even now, when I kid her like that, it's hard for her to, I kind of, I know that's going to, so I'm kind of in a mean-spirited way will say that every now and then, just to get to her. But she knows it's a joke by now. Yeah, I know. I'm bad. I know.
You tease each other.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's done good
Yeah.
naturedly.
And we just act like a couple of kids. I swear to God, we rarely have very serious conversations. We just play together.
Yeah. Wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has her life and I have mine, and so we really don't even spend that much time together. But it's just the way it was meant to be.
And then when you do get to spend time together, it's special and you enjoy it. And
it's not that we do that much. We just start when we're together, we're together. It's not like, we got to go to a concert or we got to go to dinner or we got to go to a movie or whatever. We don't have to plan ways to be together. When we're together, and it just kind of happens or it doesn't.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, this has been so great. We just really got carried away, didn't we?
I don't know. How long have we
For an
been?
hour.
Really? Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. It's
Almost 10 after 2.
my
So
goodness.
what are some parting words of wisdom for single people who are, the people who are going to be taking this course, Tom, are people who struggle with dating. I meet so many people who are afraid to date and meet others. They're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of their own ego comparing themselves to other
Yeah.
people. I have a good friend in New York City, my gosh, replete with people who are single and want to be in a good relationship. But she says, well, are you kidding me? The stakes are so high because there's so much competition. So there's so much thinking in people's way of just enjoying.
Yeah. Well, look, I guess you have to learn to be comfortable with yourself. You have to learn to have a good relationship with you by understanding that you're not your ego, so you can just learn how to be. And then once you have that well-being, it seems to me that relationships don't become a necessity. They become a choice. They become, again, the frosting on the cake. And then the other stuff, the fear, whatever, just begins to settle or not mean that much, I guess. Not mean that much. So I don't know. I think just like me, the people that you're speaking of just need to continue to look for the understandings and insights that will lead to what I just described. And then I think relationships just happen.
Right.
And it's more likely that they're going to happen good if people have this understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really all it takes is one. I mean, it's nice to, I mean, I've never, I mean, my wife refers to my PhD as Pizza Hut delivery. He said, I have a PhD, so you mean Pizza Hut delivery? And I say, yes. And what I mean by that is she doesn't take all that stuff that seriously, which is wonderful.
Pizza Hut delivery. I heard piled higher and deeper, but I hadn't heard Pizza Hut delivery.
Yeah, we'll add that to the collection. Yeah.
That's funny.
So that's what I would say, because, don't focus on the relationship. I think, again, how you describe the people, I'm sure they're wonderful people, is that in some way, I mean, why would you be afraid of a relationship unless in some way you were connecting your worth or well-being to it? That's what shows up for me. And why would you be afraid of rejection if you simply understand that everybody you're meeting is seeing you through their thinking?
Right.
And it's not you that's creating their experience of you.
Right. Their illusion of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, still, if somebody doesn't like me or says something, the thoughts will come to mind at times. But then the other thoughts will come in and kind of clarify that, and it goes away. You take your hand off the hot stove.
Becomes so obvious.
Well, anyway, I hope that my bearing my soul about my screw-ups and then fortunate to have found the principles, to have learned and had the realizations that I have, that the principles have pointed me toward, will be helpful for some people.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. It's been helpful to me, Tom. So
Well, me too. And I appreciate you pinning me down here to do this again. And hopefully it's recorded this time. We don't have to do it over like we did the first.
Oh, yeah.
Did you press the right button, Lori?
The record button is on. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lori. I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care. I hope to meet Susan someday, the next conference.
Sounds good. Okay, you got it.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.